there's anything I don't want to do again, it's the MCAT. My most highly requested video is actually an MCAT study schedule video. I watched so many of these videos when I was studying for my MCAT and just basically started collecting bits and pieces of what I think would work the best in my own MCAT study schedule. So I do believe that this is very personal. Everyone learns differently. Everyone tests differently. Everybody has a different amount of time to study for this test. There are so many of these videos online talking about the perfect MCAT study schedule. I myself made a video following an MCAT study schedule on Reddit. It was actually one of the first videos that I published on my YouTube channel. That was a fun video to try out if you guys do want to watch it. But the downfall of a lot of these videos I have found is that they are too specific on their time frame. With that being said, it truly makes no sense that there are some videos telling you that there is only one way to achieve a high score that you will be proud of. So today I just wanted to simplify the MCAT study schedule as much as possible. I remember that when I first sat down, I watched a bunch of these videos and I had no idea what I was doing. Where do you start when you're looking at all of this information? My first piece of advice is to take the diagnostic exam. You're probably tired of hearing this, and maybe at the point you're watching this video, you've probably already taken one. So a diagnostic test sometimes is a half length, but it gives you practice questions, passages, and just gives you an inside scoop into what the actual exam style questions look like. I would recommend to give this your all. I remember when I took my diagnostic test, I did not do well, but it's not about your score. It's just giving you a glimpse into what the questions look like, what the exam feels like, and what sections you're especially having a hard time with, because this is what's going to help you get into the next step, which is content review. And in content review, you need to really focus and hone in on those subjects that you hate and that you think you're really bad at. Now, the diagnostic exam is 100% going to humble you, but I actually had some friends that did pretty well, and that was consistent throughout most of their studying. And I had friends that did really poorly on the diagnostic exam and then did amazing on the real exam. There's no telling how much you can improve from the diagnostic exam. I think I went up like 29 points from my diagnostic exam to my real MCAT day, so there's a lot of room for improvement, so don't feel upset about it. The next step is content review, and I think that this step is where a lot of people go wrong. So there are two mistakes that you can make when doing content review. Number one is the black hole method, basically, where you just super dive into every single topic. You're taking notes on every single chapter of every single book and basically forcing yourself to almost retake those courses that you already took, right? And then the second method is doing it quickly, not really going in depth on any of the material and kind of skimming through everything. But what's most difficult is finding that nice in between where you are going in depth on the material that you feel you're not good at and going just surface level on the things that you have learned more recently, or maybe you know you test the best on. Some people like doing content review because they learn through textbooks, through videos, through diagrams, using active recall. Whatever way you have found that you learn while you're in school, while you're in lectures, while you're taking exams, don't feel the need to just 180 completely change your study habits for this test. If that works for you, continue trying it. In order to start content review, you need to figure out how you learn best, because I can sit here and tell you that I love watching YouTube videos and taking notes and then pairing it with the textbook just to see how everything flows together. But if that doesn't work for you, then you're wasting your time. But what's important to understand here is that content review never fully ends. And I don't mean that you're gonna be stuck reading textbooks or watching videos and doing in-depth notes on these topics all the way until the day of the exam. But you are gonna have to reference videos and keep your mind refreshed on some concepts that you're just inevitably gonna forget every now and then. You wanna make sure that you're building a strong foundation across all MCAT science subjects because you're tested on all of them evenly. And I know, for example, I wanted to spend the least amount of time on biochem because that was my least favorite, but that's the exact opposite of what I should have been doing. On the AAMC website, which is the actual site where you sign up to take your MCAT MCAT, they actually have an entire rubric on the topics that are covered in the MCAT. And while this is a very long and extensive rubric, I made it a point to put it over on Excel or just write it down and separate my studying into those individual chunks of information to make sure that I'm covering most, if not all, of the topics on there. The way that I started structuring my studying was basically splitting the exam in half. So my first day of content review would be Chem Phys and CARS. And then the next day I would do the other half of the exam, which is Biochem, and Psych Soc. And this is just kind of how I would fluctuate every day doing 2 topics. That way you keep everything fresh in your mind. I feel like one of the worst mistakes that people make when doing content review is that they'll only focus on one subject at a time. And that doesn't really work, because think about if you were to just start doing Biochem, you do all of Biochem, a month on Chem Phys and a month on Psych Soc. By the time that you finish reviewing and studying Psych Soc, nobody's gonna be talking about meiosis and mitosis anymore. You're not even gonna know what is happening. So that is why I made it a point to start doing UWorld questions early and start using their Q bank pretty early. They actually have an amazing comprehensive prep course that I had, and this really just made my life easier in so many different ways. Their prep course actually even has textbooks online that you can use to cross-reference if you're watching any videos, if you're taking notes, or if you just want a better explanation of topics. I just love that they have that as an option. And I'm a very visual person, and their images are just chef's kiss. So these dedicated study blocks are definitely going to make the biggest difference in your studying. You're getting used to not only working in the same order of the exam, you're getting introduced to the idea of sitting for longer periods of time and retaining information. Now, while I can't tell you how to specifically study because everyone learns so differently, what I can tell you are just some of the tools that I used that made my content review phase that much easier. The first thing that I already mentioned is actually the UWorld Comprehensive Prep course, because they have these textbooks that are amazing. They really helped me find the information easily with their table of contents. And then I was able to take my own notes and organize it based on the actual subject on the exam. I would write down using the double AMC rubric just specifically what category it fell into. For example, this is in the biochem section, and then this is subject 1A, amino acids, and then I would just go on and write my notes that I could reference later. I think that one of the most important things that I did during my content review phase for subjects such as biochem and Chem Phys is actually to start a cheat sheet early or an equation sheet. I've shown this before in another video, and I've talked about this a lot because that's how much I recommend it. But during the first 10 minutes of the real exam on your test day, you actually have something called a tutorial period that you can choose to accept. During this tutorial period, you can write whatever you want on this pamphlet. Once again, if you watch my videos, I always have this pamphlet right next to me, so I'm just gonna pull it out. This is basically the exact one that you get on the actual exam day with this little marker, which is wet erase. And you can write down all of the formulas that you remember, all of the equations that you think are important, anything during those 10 minutes that you want to write down, you can. So it's very important to have an established equation / cheat sheet that you want to write down during those first 10 minutes of the exam, when you just want to feel like you can pour everything on paper in case you forget later. So start that cheat sheet early, continue to add to it while you start studying. I can show you guys the one that I have made. So this is one that is color coded. This is bio section. And then on this side, I actually have some Chem Phys formulas and important information that I thought was pertinent and I would keep adding to. Now, while you're actually doing content review, a lot of people choose to finish content review before looking at any sort of practice questions. And while I do think that that is feasible and that is understandable because you want to feel like you're 100% done with everything, remember, like I said before, you're never going to be 100% done with content review. So this is when UWorld comes back round 2 for their Q banks, which are amazing. I could not have done my MCAT studying without UWorld's Q banks. And once my membership had ended and I didn't have UWorld close to the exam, I was freaking out and I did not know what to do with myself. That's another reason why I actually liked using the UWorld MCAT course, because you can actively apply information that you're learning instead of just passively consuming information for hours. Something interesting about the Q banks is that you can actually give your friend the same Q bank code and you guys can take the same questions at the same time and review them together if that's something that you want to do if you're studying with a group of people. And if you're wondering, UWorld does actually give you an in-depth explanation of every question and why you got it wrong. I also just think it's really helpful to do the same question sets as your friend, because sometimes people just have a certain explanation or way of addressing a question that is so different to the way you would have approached it, and it just makes it click in your brain. You can sit there and learn the function of inhibitors and fluids and resistance and voltage and just all of these concepts. You're not gonna have a real understanding of how much you know and how much you can apply the information until you do those practice questions. So in my opinion, I would not recommend to 100% wait until you're done with content review before you actually start doing those UWorld Q banks. Especially because UWorld actually gives you the ability to select what specific topics you want mentioned in your Q banks, the amount of questions, and then whether you want detailed explanations right after you click your answer. Let's say that yesterday you did Chem Phys and Cars. So you did, I don't know, voltage and resistance, and you did some Cars passages on UWorld to practice. Now today, it's your turn to do content review on biochem and psych-soc. So the first thing that you're gonna do when you sit down is actually do 10 questions, let's say, on the topics that you learned yesterday. That way, tomorrow, you review the topics you're learning today. And it just keeps going on like that, and you can really build on your knowledge and continue to add more and more questions or more and more subjects to your UWorld questions. That way, you're constantly cycling between learning new content, reviewing it, and applying it to questions. This is way more effective than spending weeks just learning new material and hoping that your brain memorizes everything. Now, once you start doing your practice questions and you feel a little bit more comfortable with the actual structure of the questions, you can start using Anki. If you feel like you enjoy active recall or you haven't really given it a fair chance, this is when I would start to utilize Anki as a way to keep all of that information fresh in your brain. When you're doing UWorld's practice questions and you get a question wrong, or you forgot the definition of a topic, I would highly recommend to start an Anki deck labeled new content or content review. I actually watched an amazing video, which was the one that showed me how to use Anki and best use it to study for the MCAT, which I'm gonna link up here. I have a love-hate relationship with Anki. Even though it's annoying and you have to do it every day, there is a sense of satisfaction that comes with learning all of that information and sitting down and thinking, wow, I made all of these decks, I made all of these cards, and this is information that I know. Another option is to actually download a pre-made deck. For example, I used the Miles Down deck when I was studying for my MCAT, and then you can actually hide certain topics that you haven't done yet on content review and only practice the certain subjects or concepts that you've reviewed during content. This gives you also a better understanding of what you might need to cover if you haven't already. The thing that UWorld actually added recently that was a lifesaver was the You Ask section, which is kind of an AI tutor, which is absolutely insane because you can ask any question and they will basically in-depth explain the question to you, why you got it wrong, and why the correct answer is correct. Basically, if you're studying at like 1 a.m. and you get a biochem pathway wrong, you can just ask the AI tutor. That will save you like 40 minutes spiraling on the internet. And eventually, you need to stop obsessing over content review and actually start putting in the work on full lengths. Now, UWorld actually has a couple of full lengths that I love and that I've used because I just love their explanations. Now, this is when you're gonna start building your stamina. You've already started the practice questions. You know most, if not all, of the content. You know what the passages look like, and you start to get ready to sit there for extensive periods of time and answer these questions as best as you can. In the UWorld course that I had, I actually had to pay for an extra full length because it didn't come as part of the course. But now that they have a second one for free, which is great because there's really not that many full lengths out there despite the AAMC ones, but you kind of want to save those until you're closer to the actual exam day because those are just the ones from the source. You know what I'm saying? Now, just because UWorld has all of those explanations on their full lengths does not mean that you don't actually have to spend the time and do an in-depth review of that full length. You do nothing by taking an 8-hour exam and then just moving on and not reviewing it. When reviewing your full length, it probably should be taking you around the same amount of time that it took you to actually take the test. You actually need to sit down and not only understand what the right answer was, but why you got it wrong. Was it a timing issue? Maybe you didn't review that content properly. Maybe it was a subject you've actually haven't covered yet or you have never seen before. And this is why I say that content review actually never ends, because this is when you're gonna take the chance to go back and actually go over some of that material that you missed. And you can really take note of what patterns really keep showing up on your full lengths. Maybe questions that you keep getting wrong. Are you getting more passage-based questions wrong? Maybe more discrete questions wrong. And then this will give you an understanding of how you can actually proceed. Now, I will say that even when you're doing full lengths and reviewing them, I still want you to be doing Anki and maybe some Q banks every now and then. Just, I think one of the most important things when you're doing your full length reviews is to be 100% honest with yourself, because sometimes to move forward, we just want to say, oh, I knew that. I knew the answer was B. No, you didn't. You do nothing by taking an 8-hour exam and then just moving on and not reviewing it. So stop trying all these random schedules on TikTok, on Reddit from people that got 528s because it's their perfect schedule. You just have to find what works for you. And that's why I didn't give you guys any specific time frames for a lot of these steps, because it's very personal and everyone learns and works differently. So I just wanted to break it down into these 3 phases and just kind of how I implemented my study schedule for the MCAT and how I was able to improve, what was it, like 29 points from my diagnostic all the way until my real exam. So I hope you guys were able to take away at least some of these steps. Let me know if any of these things are already implemented into your study schedule, or maybe some things that you have added from this video that you did not consider before. I'm gonna put all of the information about the UWorld prep course that I used in the description box in case anybody wants to see it. So yeah, bye.